all of a sudden in 2 weeks since he's been on the bud list, 3 rushing touchdowns. Guess how many he had in
0.
his 9 games before that? 0. He's thrown the ball well. Yesterday, he threw it well, had his most passing yards this season. 2 weeks ago, had his higher passer rating.
The Jags are, I think, going to finish with the second best record in the conference, going to finish as the 2 seed. Trevor will surge like he did at the end of last year, at the end of the season, to be one of the hottest quarterbacks going into the postseason.
Etienne is really good. He's just really
Calvin
good.
Ridley's really good. He showed up yesterday. They're tied in. Ingram's good. I mean, they got a good team.
They got a good team. Very quietly, Jacksonville has won 7 out of 8 games.
Ladies and gentlemen and boys and girls, I'm just going to jump right into it at this point with the Jacksonville Jaguars, because this team continues to prove people wrong week in and week out. Of course, the big hiccup in their season so far was the blowout loss against the 49ers, and while it might have stung in the moment, I really do think it was exactly what this team needed. Heading up to that game, the Jaguars were pretty much on cruise control due to the bad opponents that they were playing against, and they played in that same cruise control manner against the 49ers as well, and we saw what happened. But ever since what I'm going to call a wake-up call, Trevor Lawrence has looked to be the MVP that everyone was expecting him to be coming into this season, and that's caused this offense to look like a completely different offense. And when you have a defense to go along with that that's been dominant all season long, you get a team that looks pretty scary to play against. But what's crazy about all of this is that even with all of the Jaguars' success over these past 2 weeks, I still don't think this team has come anywhere close to their full potential. But before we get into why I believe that, if you like Jaguars content just like this, make sure to go down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any Jags videos for the remainder of this season. Okay, so to get back on topic with the Jacksonville Jaguars, this is a team that came into the season with super high expectations, considering Trevor Lawrence was going into year 3, and the fact that they added some key players this offense that a lot of people thought was going to put them over that hump. And as we all know, at the start of the season, they didn't look like that, and then they found themselves finding their groove as the season went on. But when they ran into the 49ers, they obviously lost 34-3, and it made them look a little bit like frauds. But in my opinion, like I mentioned earlier, while that loss looks bad on the schedule, I really do think it's exactly what this Jaguars team needed, because ever since then, they've looked like a completely different team. The offense and Trevor Lawrence really weren't performing to the level that we all thought they could up until that 49ers game and in that 49ers game. But ever since that game, this Jaguars offense, and specifically Trevor Lawrence, really has looked like what everyone expected. Trevor Lawrence is playing extremely efficient, not putting the ball in harm's way too often, outside of that one interception against the Texans, which we all know was complete BS. But even if you did count that, he's still playing at an extremely high level, throwing for over 600 yards in his last 2 games alone on 3 touchdowns rushing and passing, which is obviously good to see. He's doing a great job at getting the ball into his playmakers' hands, and if he does get pressured, he's doing a great job of getting outside of the pocket and making plays out of structure, which is huge for an offense. Speaking of getting the ball into playmakers' hands, though, we need to talk about this weapon group that the Jaguars have, because they had a lot of hype around them coming into this season, but to be honest, they really weren't living up to the expectations earlier in the season. The Jaguars this offseason picked up Calvin Ridley, and he was supposed to bring a true number 1 to this Jacksonville offense. But before these past 2 weeks, they really weren't giving him the targets that he needed to put up number 1 receiver production and number 1 receiver plays. But I think the coaching staff realized on their bye week that they need to do whatever they can to get the ball into this guy's hands and give him chances, because in these last 2 games, they've done exactly that, and he's made the best of it. He's gone for almost 200 yards and 3 touchdowns in the past 2 games alone, proving that he really can be that number 1 receiver that he was traded to be. And now when you look at this Jaguars offense and you consider the fact that they have a true number 1, the offense starts to look a lot better. Calvin Ridley can be that true number 1, and you can now pair that with a really good receiver 2 and receiver 3 in Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. Christian Kirk is good enough to be a receiver 1 if you need him to be, so the fact that he's your receiver 2 is pretty insane to think about. And I also think that Zay Jones could be a receiver 2 if you needed him to be, so the fact that he's a receiver 3 is really good as well. And then on top of that, you have one of the more athletic tight ends in the league in Evan Ingram, who has proven to be one of the better receiving tight ends in the league at this current current point, which adds another great weapon to this offense. So when you think about this Jaguars passing attack, it looks really good on paper, and they've been living up to what they look like on paper in these past 2 weeks. But even with all the success that we've seen in the passing game, I think what really holds this offensive unit together is the fact that they also have a really good running back and a run game that's continued to get better throughout the season. Travis Etienne is one of the most underrated running backs in the league, in my opinion, because not only is he great running the ball between the tackles or on the edges, but you can also use him as a receiving back as well if you need to, and he can do great things there as well. So when you look at this offense from top to bottom, you see pretty quickly they have a really dynamic running back, they have weapons galore all over the field, and they have an elite quarterback to tie it all together, which makes me think that this offense has the potential to be one of the best offenses in the entire league. But what's really crazy about this is that even with all of the talent the Jaguars have on offense, I don't think anyone would argue the fact that the reason they've won the majority of their games is due to this super underrated defense. And as we all know, this defense starts and stops with this pass rush that's continued to get better all year long. The first guy that pops out to you when you look at this defensive line is obviously Josh Allen, because this guy is having a career season, and in my opinion, he should have more recognition for the Defensive Player of the Year. He currently has 13 sacks in just 11 games, and he has 2 forced fumbles on top of that, so it's pretty obvious to me that he's one of the premier edge rushers in this league now. And then to pair with him, you have Trevon Walker, who might not be living up to the #1 overall pick just yet, but he's still a really solid secondary pass rusher to pair along with what Josh Allen's been able to do this year. And you also have Roy Robertson Harris, who is really good on the interior, which makes up one of the better D-lines in the NFL. But to be honest, coming into the season, a lot of people are high on this defensive line already, but what a lot of people weren't high on was this linebacker room. But these guys this year really have shown up and showed out. The Jags' main linebacker duo obviously consists of Devin Lloyd and Aluokon, who have exceeded all expectations that anyone had for them coming into the season, and they've really made themselves, in my opinion, one of the better duos in football. They're really good at coming downhill and filling in running lanes to help stop the run, and they've also done a pretty good job in coverage, which is something a lot of linebackers struggle with. But what's even crazier is that the Jaguars don't just have a great front seven, they also have a great secondary that's been playing good all year long. Obviously, Tyson Campbell is having a really solid season so far this year, and then Darius Williams is a great corner two to pair along with that, and then Trey Herndon is great as well in that nickel spot, and then of course in the back end you have Rayshawn Jenkins and Andre Sisco, who are really good players as well. So when I'm looking at this team from top to bottom, I see an offense with talent galore with an elite quarterback, and I see a defense with an elite edge rusher and really solid players everywhere else on the field. This really does make me believe that this Jaguars team has a chance to get the 1 seed in a super competitive AFC, but that's just my opinion, so I'm still curious to know how you guys are feeling about the Jacksonville Jaguars in the comments below. So let me know your thoughts, and with that being said, I'll catch all of you guys in the next video.